More than education, training, and experience, a person's level of resiliency is what often determines who succeeds and who fails. The inter-office dynamics at work is an ongoing challenge, and employees and managers are feeling the pain. Whether you own a family business or work for a Fortune 500 company, resiliency is truly the X factor. So take a coffee break and come join us for another edition of the Resiliency X Factor, or as we like to simply call it, RX, your prescription for success in business. So welcome back to another edition of the Resiliency X Factor, or as simply we like to call it, RX. Now, in our previous podcast, we spent some time exploring resiliency, but through the lens of what it takes to be a resilient leader. We spent some time talking about the importance of trust, as well as helping those leaders work through those dynamics of simply going from doer to actually being a successful manager and leader. Now, Dr. Keith, I'd like to spend some time talking more about some skills. Now, as we've said before, becoming a supervisor or manager can be a very difficult task. Now, there's several core skills beyond just simply building trust, as we discussed in the first part of being a resilient leader. Let's think about what are some of those other skills. Now, I'm going to throw the first one that comes to mind for me, and that oftentimes is motivation.
Well, you got it, Matt, no question about it. But in my typical fashion, I'm throwing a question back to you. And you're a leader, right? Obviously, you're a leader in your organization. So how do you motivate others, Matt?
All right, well, first of all, I may start calling you Socrates and not Dr. Keith, because I feel like it's the Socratic method. Every question comes back to me. But to answer that question of how you motivate others, my experience and what I've seen leaders choose to do when they're in the workplace is they pull the levers such as rewarding and recognizing them through maybe they'll provide raises, oftentimes maybe spot bonuses, they'll look for advancement with regard to some career opportunities. Things of that nature are typically the first moves that leaders take when they're trying to, quote, motivate those employees.
And there lies the problem, Matt.
So what do you mean when you say there lies the problem? I wouldn't think people would have an issue with having more money in their pocket. I don't think they'd have a problem with getting a promotion or getting a spot bonus. How does that become a problem?
Well, I was kind of unfair to you, man. I set you up based on my question, but necessary to prove my point. Motivation, is, I got to tell you, is one of the most misunderstood concepts in business today.
So why is it misunderstood? Like I said, obviously, I probably just ran right into that trap. So how is motivation misunderstood?
Well, it's important to keep in mind that motivation is an internal process that takes place in each person. It's up to the individual themselves to determine what is motivating to them. Not to somebody else or what you do or don't do. It's an internal process that has to take place. It does take place within the individual.
So if I'm a leader, now I'm kind of thrown for a bit of a loop. What does the leader need to do then to unmask or uncover the secret sauce of motivation?
It's not a secret sauce, but it is a better understanding of motivation. First, they need to understand their people. Because what's motivating for you, Matt, is different for me, is different from Tim and everybody else. So first job is to really know your people. Then, and here's a major distinction, the job of the leader is to provide opportunities for people to achieve so that they will become more motivated, as opposed to the way it's been taught forever, than motivating people to get them to achieve. Do you hear the difference here, Matt?
I think so. So, Dr. Keith, if I'm understanding it right, it isn't necessarily something a leader needs to do or does not do. Rather, it's creating an environment where that person can really be successful. Therefore, at least my thought process is helping to create a better sense of motivation within that person itself. Am I onto something here?
You are exactly. But unfortunately, the way it's been taught and the way it's presented and done, if you would, is motivating people to get them to achieve. And that's the rub. That's the problem.
So that's kind of where the different concept of the different types of motivation oftentimes occur. And I would imagine corporations, small companies oftentimes are providing, if you will, the wrong types of motivation that leaders can be able to draw upon.
Look, I'm Socrates, Mr. Psychologist. You're becoming. Look at you.
I'm getting there slowly but surely.
Well, you're onto something there, Matt. And there's two types of motivation. There's the intrinsic motivation and extrinsic. So to clarify, the intrinsic motivation is the desire to engage in an activity or behavior for its own sake. For example, I work at the ABC company because it's challenging and fun. That's intrinsic, as opposed to extrinsic, the desire to engage in the activity because of some external benefit, like I work at the ABC company because, hey, the benefits are good, the money's good. That's extrinsic.
So it seems like the entire society that we live in tends to focus on the extrinsic motivation. When you just shared those examples, the first thing that came to mind is, well, that's where we've grown up over the course of the years going through school and the systems of how we've been rewarded. And that has in turn fed its way into the workplace and certainly the ways in which we try to reward and recognize our employees.
You bet. That's great insight, man. And you're spot on, no question about it. I'm going to throw another question your way, and out to every listener right now also. What's more powerful, intrinsic or extrinsic motivation? What would you think?
Well, I think it's a trick question. That's what I think. I want to say it is extrinsic motivation, but I'm going to take a good guess as we've talked more and more that you're probably going to tell us it's intrinsic.
Oh, you're so smart. It is. I mean, think about it. If you could actually, if I could have heard or seen all the listeners, they probably would agree with you, Matt, that it is intrinsic. It's certainly much more powerful. But here's the major problem. That's a major problem because, as you said, Matt, our entire country is focused on the extrinsics, and we're putting the emphasis in the wrong area. And it goes back to what we learned in psychology. If you remember, if you were awake in your psychology class, Matt, and not sleeping in the back, but all the behavioral psychology when Skinner did his experiments with the dogs and the cats and the pigeons, and hey, reward and punishment, and everybody jumped on that behavioral psychology bandwagon.
But I think a lot of our listeners are going to say, listen, intrinsic isn't going to put food on the table. It's the extrinsic motivation that tells people this is how I'm going to help, fund a college, fund for my kids, or be able to go on vacation or do the things that we like to do with a society that has become very, I don't want to say superficial, but a fashion where we feel like we have to fund our lives oftentimes, F-U-N-D, fund our lives oftentimes with the dollars, with the extrinsic. So why is it more on the intrinsic that we should be focused on?
Well, again, I'm not against money and reward, and those types of things. But the emphasis is in the wrong place because, as we already know, intrinsic motivation, doing something because you really want to do it, is more powerful and more important than people than money. Matt, how many times, and every listener, I want you to think about this question. How many times have you turned down another job where you could have made more money, but you turned it down? And chances are the reason why you turned it down, it was based on some intrinsic factor within yourself.
Oh, without a doubt, because I always tell employees, be careful leaving a job just for more money, because what do employees want after they get that more money?
They want more.
You got it. I've yet to meet the employee that says, hey, that last raise was enough, I'm all set, thank you, no more. People always want more, so they have to look at what else they're focused on. So we have had some conversations around really this psychology mindset that managers or employees tend to kind of get locked into looking at things a certain way, and they feel like they can only reward employees a certain way. Break down some of that psychology around us.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Matt. That in psychological terms, we're calling that people are functionally fixated.
Functionally fixated.
Yeah, which is defined as something, seeing something in a way that it was originally designed.
Kind of just being locked into thinking there's only one way of doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we find it in many ways. We believe something to be true. For example, I'll give you a quick example. How many times have you heard that by your grandparents told you, your mother told you, don't go outside with a wet head?
Yeah, I got that when I was younger. I still get that with my wife now.
You're going to catch a death of cold. That's not true. But we walk around believing it. We're functionally fixated. And organizations are functionally fixated in the fact that they think that the way you motivate people to get the best out of people is to give them all the extrinsic things.
Okay, I'm starting to pick up on it. I think our listeners are too. We clearly have taken the time to break down what motivation is, the defining difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And when we come back from our break, if you will, Dr. Keith, let's take some time to discussing more what leaders can do to be able to create that climate of motivation and do it the right way. Sounds fair? All right. Thanks again, Dr. Keith, and we're going to see you after the break. So welcome back from our break. Dr. Keith, I'd like to take some time to really discuss how motivation is oftentimes misunderstood in business, as well as distinguishing the different types of motivation. Now, before break, we spoke about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, but what can leaders do to really create that motivating climate?
I think one of the first things that leaders need to recognize is that when a person is intrinsically deprived, they automatically focus on the extrinsics.
That sounds painful, intrinsically deprived, but tell us a little more. Explain what that is meant to mean.
Let me give you an example of something I've seen very often, coming from the state of Michigan and the Detroit area. We're doing work in a lot of the auto plants and manufacturing facilities. I've seen this when you have a bored line worker that all day long he's just putting on parts of a car 12 hours a day doing the same thing over and over and over again, and they basically are bored. They're not challenged. So what do? So that's what I mean by intrinsically deprived. So what do? What do they focus on? I need more money. I want to make the money, Mr. Foreman, Matt, you got. I want to make that kind of money. And they focus on the extrinsic. But here's the interesting part. That same person goes home that weekend and spends hours upon hours in his garage working on his car. And he doesn't make any money doing that. How come?
It's a well thought out point. I mean, I'm going to still go back and ask you that question. You're telling us that money doesn't motivate people at all.
No. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the point of that is that when a person's intrinsically deprived, they will focus on the extrinsic like money. So I'm not saying the money's not important. Come on. I got to make a living just like you, Matt. Look, if I had all your money, I can retire. But I think the question that you're getting at, does money not motivate people? Well, we know this. In the short answer, because I know we're limited on time, certainly money does motivate people depending on who you are, the situation. And the research is pretty clear that the lower pay scale that a person is on, the more they would focus more on the money and things of that nature. But here's the real question I think you're getting at, and it's a critical question for all leaders to think about, and that is, does money motivate people to a higher performance? So if you walk in and say to everybody, okay, we're going to be working every Saturday and Sunday for the next 10 weeks, but don't worry about it. We're going to be paying you time and a half. Do you think that individual's coming into work every Sunday morning going, hey, I'm so happy to be here?
I'm hearing you. So if we're looking at it a certain way, money is really the entrance into the game. How that team then performs once they're in the game really is what it's all about.
Yeah, so it's the lure to get people in, right?
You and I oftentimes will look at things from a perspective of threes. Threes sometimes can be the recipe to success for understanding three things. And so talk about what we would call the 3 C's to really ensuring that you're able to successfully motivate your employees.
Well, yeah, creating a motivating climate. Okay. The first is collaborate. Second is content. And the third is choice.
So we'll break each one of those down when we're thinking about how that climate, if you will, for employees are best created by their managers and leaders. So the first one you mentioned was collaborate. Expand upon that for us.
Well, Psychology 202, Matt. People don't like to be told what to do. So get your folks involved in the decision-making process, engage them, collaborate with them. That leads to stronger commitments.
Yeah, it continuously amazes and surprises me that when I see in an environment that is filled with collaboration and we're not in tell mode where managers are just telling an employee what to do, barking in order to them, but engaging them into the process, that all of a sudden their level of interest, their motivation, their need to want to perform at a high performance level and provide the highest quality product and do whatever it takes to get it done all occurs once they are brought into the fold in a collaborative sense, as opposed to just an order being barked or an email being sent that says do it.
You got it. Absolutely. The second C stands for content. And what we're talking about here is the work itself. And we know that motivation is at its highest when the opportunity to learn new skills and experience a variation in task is present. In other words, as I think, I forgot who it was, one of our great thought leaders, said, if you want, Tom Peters said it. I think it was Tom Peters said, if you want people to do a good job, give them a good job to do.
Fair enough, but I'm always here to kind of keep us both in check and say a lot of times, though, and we have owners of small businesses that are listening in on our podcast as well that say, listen, every job I have isn't a premium great job. Sometimes people just have to get their head down and do what they're being asked to do, and the next day they wake up and it's the same thing over and over again. Help us through that one to ensure that the content is still challenging enough.
Well, you're right, Matt. You know, not every job is going to be a great job, but the but here is how you go about dealing with it, discussing it with your team. Let me give you a quick example. Let's say you're a leader of the maintenance department, and one of the jobs that has to get done in the organization is clean the toilets, clean the restrooms. Well, what are you going to do?
As long as I don't have to do it, I'm okay.
Yeah, I figured that would be an answer from you. But, you know, let me say it a little differently. Would you just walk in there and you tell Joe, who just came on the team, with the lowest seniority, you got Joe, you have that job for the next 10 years. Or, knowing what we're talking about now, go in there, throw it out to the team. Let them, which is tied to the first C, and collaborate with the team. How do we best deal with it? What's the solution to that? And guess what's going to happen? They're going to come up with, maybe something like, let's rotate the job. And so now you got them involved. It's their idea, which goes back to the first C, collaborate, and they're going to be more committed to that process as opposed to being told.
I mean, I think another angle to build on content can also be helping those employees understand what the broader vision or mission is of the organization. I've heard countless examples of cast members that work for Disney that recognize that their role, let's say simply as a street sweeper, is not just about making sure that the streets are clean, but their role is part of being that broader cast to ensuring that the overall production, if you will, the experience of those that are attending a Disney park or in a Disney event truly feel that special aspect of the overall experience.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a good description, man, and I agree with that.
So tell us about the third C.
The third C is about choice. People rebel when they feel control. The level of intrinsic motivation increases when a person has autonomy and choices. Think about this. All the parents who are listening and they have children, you got kindergartners, first graders coming home. I want a snack. And you then say, here's an apple. I don't want an apple. Okay, right? It's very typical. Yeah. As opposed to,
I have a bushel of apples at my house because the kids won't eat them.
Now the child comes home, I want a snack. And you say, well, okay, good. You have a choice between some popcorn, an apple, or you can have some vegetable and dip. Which one? This is great. Give me an apple. People like choices. Remove those choices, and what happens is, it goes down. Intrinsic motivation decreases big
So
time.
the more a leader is involved in helping to engage that employee in the decision and promoting that intrinsic motivation, really they're more apt to feel motivated and drive to success.
Yes, you bet.
All right. So what about from an organizational point of view, what can the company itself, small business or large organization, what can the company do to help stimulate what a person's sense of motivation really is?
Well, we really identified 5 motivational drivers within the workplace. The first is a reputable organization. Second, talented leaders. Third, quality work life. 4, a team environment. And 5, a place to learn and grow.
All right. Well, why don't we take just a minute or two and quickly break down each of those. A reputable organization.
Well, this is pretty simple, man. It's like, it's a company. You want to work at a company that has a positive reputation, a company that's successful, and providing fair benefits, things in that nature.
So talented leaders, I'm going to take that one on, just simply recognizing that it's very important that we build positive relationships, we communicate effectively, and truly we demonstrate the things that we've talked about in this most recent podcast. The third, quality of work life.
Oh, yeah. This is a place where your work is seen as meaningful and challenging, demonstrate competency. There's lots of autonomy in the 3 C's we just got through talking about.
Fourth, you and I have talked about team environment and making sure that people are part of a broader purpose, both not only just working individually, but amongst the team as well as the organization, which naturally spawns things like creativity and innovation, not to mention some great friendly and supportive relationships that get built over time.
Absolutely. And the last is a place to learn and grow. And I tell you, this is critical for all the younger generation coming in, millennials and the new Z generation. They want to be educated. They want to be trained and coached. They want to have lots of opportunities to advance and grow. So when an organization can create that in their culture, that's something that's going to, keep people there and at the same time create a sense of motivation for most individuals.
All right, Dr. Keith. Well, once again, I appreciate the time that we've spent really looking under the hood as it relates to motivation. While most people would have thought, hey, just write a bigger check, I think we realize there's much more that goes into motivating employees and ensuring that we as leaders become as resilient as possible to demonstrate those skills. So we hope you've enjoyed yet another edition of that Resiliency X Factor, or as we simply call it, RX, your prescription for success in business, and we will catch you at the next coffee break.